This was in 2013. I lived alone with my dog Amber in a forested neighborhood with small, quiet homes. Amber was a large husky with amber eyes, hence the name. And being a husky, we went for a lot of walks in the winter. This night, after getting home from work at 9, I immediately got her leash and took her out for a walk on the trail behind the house. It was a trail that went behind the neighborhood, through the woods, and connected a bunch of parks together. It was kind of like a forest preserve trail. There was a good amount of snow on the ground, but Amber loved it, so I toughed it out. It was nice and quiet outside that night, the sort of quiet you only get in the winter because no one else was out. We got a half-mile in, so maybe 10 minutes into the walk, when Amber suddenly stopped, perked her head up for a second, then turned around. At first, I thought she was looking at me, but then I saw her eyes were actually looking past me. I turned and looked over my shoulder. There was nothing behind me. The trail was empty, and the woods were silent and pitch black in every direction. I tried to ask Amber if she was okay, and even walked past her and pulled on the leash a bit. She kept her eyes locked on the path behind us. But eventually, with enough convincing, she started walking again. I kept checking over my shoulders, and never saw a thing, so I figured it was just one of those times a dog hears or sees something, and fixates on it, even though it's nothing. She was a smart dog, don't get me wrong, but she always had her strange moments. We finished the trail and headed back on the neighborhood street. The rest of that walk, she wasn't as energetic. So whatever she thought she saw or heard, she really didn't like. Once inside, though, she was back to normal. I fed her and started making dinner for myself. I just threw some leftovers in the microwave. Only 10-ish minutes after getting back from the walk, though, Amber all of a sudden started howling, which she usually does when she's scared. She was in the living room, so I ran in there and found her howling at the window. I hushed her and walked up to the window. The blinds weren't down, so I could see outside, and didn't see anything. But after a bit, I noticed that most of the window was frosted over, except for the one spot I was looking through. It looked like the frost had melted off that part, as if someone was breathing close to the glass, looking inside. Once I realized that, I quickly pulled the blinds down. I calmed down Amber and stood there in the living room trying to make sense of it. I had no way to know for sure, but with her barking and not really knowing any other way the frost would have melted like that, it seemed pretty likely someone had been there. I went around the house and checked the other windows, but didn't see any other signs of anyone creeping around. I was pretty weirded out, though having Amber on watch for me helped keep me much calmer and less scared about it. For better or for worse. If I were alone, I'd probably have thought about calling the cops, but it really didn't even cross my mind. I ate my dinner and turned on a movie to wind down for the night. I can't remember if I'd finished the movie and had started something else, or if it was toward the end of it, but I know at least an hour, maybe 2, had gone by. Amber was sleeping with her head resting on my lap. So when she suddenly lifted her head, I looked down and saw her eyes open and looking to my right. I only had a second to turn and see that she was looking at the front door before there were sudden loud knocks against it. Both me and Amber jumped up from the couch, but I quieted her down so I could listen. Whoever was outside must have heard me though, because as soon as Amber stopped barking, he called out, "Anyone home? Could you answer the door and help me out for a moment?" I didn't recognize his voice at all, and in the few seconds I took thinking of how to respond, he called out again. "I heard you in there. I know you're listening. I just need some help with directions. I'm not from here, and it's real cold out here." The way he just tried to explain his whole situation through the door without me having answered yet was really creepy to me. And something in his voice didn't sound genuine. So I stayed quiet, hoping he'd realize I was just going to ignore him, and would just leave. There was a longer pause this time, maybe 20 seconds, before he slammed his fist against the door, You're a real piece of shit. I'm sure this will come back around." His voice was eerily monotone when he said that, and I wasn't sure what to make of that last line. It sounded like a slight threat. I heard his footsteps leave the porch and walk away. After I thought he was far enough, I hurried to the window and looked out, but I couldn't see him. I contemplated calling the cops for 30 minutes. It was one of those situations where I felt it was justified to call, but also there wasn't anything anyone could do now that the man was gone. So I ended up deciding on a middle ground of putting in a report through a call on the non-emergency line. That way they could have the incident on file if anything were to happen. After getting off the phone, I was wide awake and knew I wouldn't be able to sleep for a while. So I sat back down and continued to watch TV, volume lowered so I could listen if he came back. And sure enough, 40 minutes later, I noticed a light moving through the blinds, followed by the sound of a car coming down the road outside. And once the sound got louder and the light got closer, it suddenly shut off. I listened to the car continue slowly rolling up and stop right outside my house. I stayed on the couch and waited for a minute, listening and praying that this was someone else, and that at any point they were going to leave. But after a while passed, I got up and bent one of the blinds down, just slightly enough to look outside. There was an old, either black or gray car parked right on the curb, headlights off, and no movement in or around it. I must have stared at the car for an entire minute, waiting to see someone get out or something, when I heard a dull click sound on the other end of the house, and half a second later, everything shut off around me. The whole house went dark. Someone had cut the power. I didn't hesitate this time to get on the phone with the cops. Within 15 seconds, the person outside started banging on the door, hitting it non-stop angrily. Some of the hits sounded heavier, even shaking the house. I was sure this was the same guy from before. I told the operator what I could, and looked back out the window to describe the car that was parked outside. As I did, the knocking stopped and footsteps rushed toward the window. I pulled back and let the blinds close. He stood outside the window for a bit, like he was waiting for me to look out again. I continued whispering to the operator on the phone. Meanwhile, Amber had been barking and whimpering the entire time. And I realized after a minute that I hadn't heard anything else. It was just Amber barking. I waited 3 or 4 minutes until the operator told me an officer was 30 seconds away before looking out the window again. Footprints led away from the window, through the snow into where the car was parked before. It was gone now. Having an officer there was a huge relief, and he looked around and noted everything that happened, but that really was it. There was nothing else to do. For weeks, even months after that night, there was this lingering feeling that the man was still out there, having some sort of vendetta against me. I just keep thinking on everything that happened that night, all the way back to Amber seeing or hearing something on the path behind us. I genuinely feel like that man had been stalking me the entire night. Knowing how likely unstable and creepy this guy was, I don't think it's far off to assume that if I'd opened the door, or not had Amber with me on that walk, and was entirely alone, I could have gone missing and never been seen again.